Welcome everyone. Here we are at day 22 in May, 22 days in a row with world-class athletes, innovators, and unique personalities from the endurance sports world for the I'm Curious to Know project. Today, I'm grateful and excited to have Chris Guillemet joining me. Chris is the CEO of Velofix. He's joining me from his beautiful home, beautiful location there in the Okanagan Valley for anyone who is familiar. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to be here, Trav. A long time. How's the East Coast treating you?
The East Coast is great. It was a little wild there for a bit. It felt like winter was never going to end. It rained for what felt like a month straight. Now it's 80 degrees and sunny and beautiful and green, and happy life.
Awesome. Have you locked the two little ones up for this call, or?
Mama's on duty. Mama's doing a great job. She knows every day at 3:30 she's on duty. I usually come out to a bit of a war zone out there because the afternoon rumbles start. But she's doing a great job and she's holding down the fort for me, which is awesome.
That's great.
Now, it has been a little while. We haven't chatted in a bit, but I've been following your journey. I've been following Velofix very closely, and from what I understand, you guys have had some scary moments in the beginning of this COVID period, but then you've been able to rebound and had some really successful months, which makes sense. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I want to take a step back and I want to touch on how the idea of mobile bike shops came to life. Where did Velofix, where was it born? How did it come to life?
It was born in a garage over beer, which I think probably a lot of businesses have started over the years. So two great business partners, David and Boris, and it was born out of frustration. It was born out of a pain point and a need to try to find a solution to something. And from our perspective, David and I were the customers. We were busy people. We just wanted to ride our bike, and we thought that the current model was broken. It just wasn't that efficient, and the level of customer service wasn't what we thought it should be. Boris was working in a bike shop while he was going to university, so he saw the other side of it in terms of the frustration, in terms of the retail environment of things. So that was it. It was very simple. It was sitting in a garage, and David had this idea of, can you take the service to the customer versus the other way around? And we didn't invent the concept of mobile bike shops. It'd been around in Europe for years, actually been around in North America, but the thought process for us at the time was, can we make it more efficient? Can we scale it? And can we make it a professional service? The conversations we had with people, bike shops sometimes were like going to the dentist. It wasn't a great experience. They were open the same time you were working. There was a bit of a challenge. You had to leave your bike there, so potentially you didn't have it for a week. And with everything going mobile and at home, we just thought there had to be a better way, and it was that simple. That was October of 2012, and by January of 2013, Boris had built a truck, and we were rolling around Vancouver.
Now, all great businesses, quite often, well, a lot of great businesses start over beer in a garage, but it's also, a lot of times it requires some feedback from the community and some gathering of data. And I know that you and David are smart business people, and you put in some of that energy and time to identify whether or not that was a market. What were some of those early conversations that you had with potential consumers and people that you would be selling to, and what was the feedback that you received from them?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think I actually had a podcast I did a while ago, and I was just listening to it, and the question was, did you have a business plan, and how much time did you spend looking at your competitors and things like that? And I'll tell you this, Trav, like we reached out to friends, colleagues. We asked people, would a service like this make sense for you? What do you think? And very quickly into those conversations, people would stop you and say, I love it. They had a lot of questions, obviously, but there's a couple of things that I mentioned on that podcast was, if we came from the bike business, we probably wouldn't have started this business because there would have been too many reasons why not to do it. And, I think you need to be careful of reaching out to people and asking for too much advice, because everybody will have a reason why something wouldn't work. So I don't want to sound like we just winged it, but the honest truth is we all wrote checks and put money in the bank. We did a little bit of recon locally, but we did wing it. We put a truck on the road, and then we basically used our network, used our contacts, and started driving word of mouth awareness. And very quickly, we realized when you start a business, it's usually friends and family. And then when we started seeing people we'd never heard of booking, that's when we realized, wow, this could be something. And very quickly it evolved, and all of a sudden we were doing pretty significant revenue in a short period of time. And Boris was working, 6-7 days a week, 18 hours a day, literally. And we quickly got feedback on our business model and made adjustments and made changes. But I don't think if we had worked on a business plan for another 6 months or 12 months and done more due diligence, we may not have got it off the ground. But that's how we got started. And there's obviously a lot more to it in terms of back end infrastructure and things like that. But that was really the basic starting point.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think sometimes you paralysis by analysis, and some people end a business before it even starts because of what you talked about. Talking to too many people who said no, bad idea, and it sounds like you guys just went with your gut. You mentioned that it wasn't a brand new concept, but in reality, it was a pretty new concept. You guys had transformed whatever model there was existing to fit with the service that you wanted to provide. You mentioned professional service. How do you begin to start pricing things out? How do you begin to start organizing route management? How do you begin to start thinking about how people are going to book and all of those things? What were some of those details that you guys had to go through to have a product that was workable and feasible?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you from a concept perspective, you want to know who you are and what you're trying to do. And I don't know, you can check what's going on in the market and you can see what potential competitors are doing, but I truly believe this. You need to build something you're passionate about, and you need to build something that you want. And it may sound very simplistic, but if you build something that you truly as a consumer think makes sense and that you want, that was basically our starting point. We chose a Mercedes Sprinter, not because it was the cheapest vehicle, but because we thought there was a certain image to it.
Yeah.
The European service courses and the Sprinter band's been used for years. So we thought that would create a profile for us, and that was a vehicle we chose. We worked on the colors, we worked on the graphics and things like that, and definitely spent a lot of time and energy there. But we really wanted to create a professional and a higher level of service, and that was the starting point of that. Having said that, you want to be very, very careful you don't price yourself out of the market.
Yeah.
So the thought process for us when we started was, well, listen, we're coming to somebody's home. It's a concierge type service, but we'll price ourselves at the same rates as the best bike shops in town. And we thought if we did that, we wouldn't give somebody a reason not to try the business, and we'd start getting some traction. So, we don't have the same overheads as a traditional retail environment does. So our margins were significantly better, but pricing wise, that's kind of how we started. In the bike industry, you buy from kind of 2 or 3 major suppliers, and everything has suggested retail pricing. So, that part was fairly straightforward. The biggest challenge we had was logistically. We wanted to make the business easy, right? So we didn't want Trav to have to phone or text or try to track down a mechanic. So the online booking system and things that we built on the back end were definitely harder. But the whole concept of this was simplicity. Yeah. And our view on it from the beginning was you have to take away as much of the challenging issues that come into play and try to simplify things. And we did that. You put your postal code in, it brings up the time and dates were available in your neighborhood, and you pick your service package and you book. Yep. And if you book Thursday at 2:00, the van should be rolling up Thursday at 2:00 to give you a major tune-up or whatever you booked.
Yep. Was it always a franchise model that you saw in the beginning, or was it we're going to have one truck, maybe we'll have 2, or was that grand vision in place where you've got 100+ trucks on the road now?
Yeah, I'm not going to BS you. The vision was to put one truck on the road and to make enough money to pay Boris a salary, and for David and I to be able to get our bikes fixed and buy product at wholesale was the first 6 months. That was our goal. But as I said to you earlier, very quickly we realized that we had something. The schedule started filling up. The feedback that we got from people was fantastic. So. I think from there we started looking at, okay, how do we scale it? And the beautiful thing of a franchise model is you're scaling the business with somebody else's capital. So you've got a franchise fee, you're building the mobile bike shops and you're selling the mobile bike shops to people. So that's why we thought the franchise model made sense. It's a service-based business. There's a lot of things that in franchising that work in our model. So that was the early concept. I wouldn't say day one we thought we had a wonderful franchise model, but very quickly it became evident that type of model made sense for us.
One thing that I've always thought about with you guys, and we've had this conversation before, sometimes, you talk about professional service, and my experience with Velofix as a consumer has been that it's been a professional service no matter what. Sometimes I'm like the mystery shopper. I don't even say that I know you, and the service is always fantastic and they go above and beyond. But I know that's not always possible. You give up some control by having someone else providing the service on your behalf. So tell me about some of those kind of quality control measures or thoughts that you go through as you're vetting the franchisees. How do you maintain that professional level of service across the board?
That's a great question. And that, to be honest, was our single biggest fear, was as we scaled this, as somebody else was doing it, are they going to give the Boris level of professional service that we were accustomed to and that we wanted? So the thing I'll say about what we've done here is our franchise partners are not typical people looking to buy franchises. It wasn't Subway or Velofix. All of our franchise partners have a passion for cycling, and that's the connect point. They come from a lot of different business backgrounds and different backgrounds across North America, but the passion for cycling is there. And from day one, when we look at selling a franchise to somebody or we start onboarding and training, it's all about customer service, because the single biggest revenue source we have today is repeat customer, and number two is referral. And we figured if you can't get those right in the beginning, it's very difficult to scale. So we use something called Net Promoter Score, which is used by many Fortune 500 companies. And basically what that is on a scale of 1 to 10, would you recommend us to a friend? 9 and 10 is yes, you're a promoter. Anything below that is you're neutral or you're not a promoter. And our score is 94.6% system-wide. And we have our franchise partners to thank for that, but they know that. The mechanic in the truck, the person that owns that franchise knows that if we don't get that first interaction right, they're not coming back, and they're not telling a friend. So it's been critical for us, and we've been blown away. We get that report every Sunday night, and every Sunday night I open it and I read it, and I'm just blown away. And I think that's been the key to our success. Is trying to make that interaction as positive as possible and as professional as possible. And as I said, I have to thank our franchise partners because they've embraced that. And we can talk about customer service and great service at a head office level all we want, but as you know, if the technician in the truck is having a shitty day and they're off, and that interaction is bad, that affects everybody across our network. So having Net Promoter Score keeps everybody honest, because we get every report from every mechanic, from every mobile bike shop across North America, and the mechanics know that. And they make the extra effort. So it's been a critical piece for what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you're right. Like, you can have the best of intentions sitting in the corporate office, in Vancouver, and Gunther here in Boston, as you say, is having an off day, and then all of a sudden that just perpetuates and grows, and can be the death of a company or death of a brand if left unchecked. I'm glad to hear that the scores are great and that you guys are doing a great job. And as I say, just to reiterate, my experience has been fantastic across the board. You mentioned franchise partners coming from an array of backgrounds. You mentioned people, with a passion for cycling, but they may not have been in the industry. Are there any standout partners or stories that you have of people who have kind of made these significant life changes? They've bought into a franchise and they've just been able to transform their life through being a Velofix franchisee?
Yeah, it's funny. We've got two different models. So we have what we call an owner-operator. That's typically a mechanic that's operating one mobile bike shop or maybe two. In most cases, obviously, they came from the industry or they had left the industry and wanted to get back into it. And then we have I'd call it the investor model. So those people are buying multiple territories or putting multiple bike shops on the road. And that comes from everything from guys on Wall Street in New York to guys that, senior vice presidents and companies in different markets. But I look at somebody like Trent Newcomber, who's our franchise partner in Denver, Colorado, who's ran a very successful veterinarian business. and was super passionate about cycling, still is, races. He's a masters racer, super fit guy. And, he saw this as an opportunity as a transition, and he's since sold his vet clinic, and he's got multiple mobile bike shops, and he just actually renewed after 5 years in terms of the franchise agreement. And, he's super passionate about it, and he loves it, and he's out at the events, and he's pumping tires, and he's engaged in the community. So I think he'd be one that I talk about a lot. Adam, who's our franchise partner in Ottawa, who's a wonderful young man who, I use him as an example, and we always do, because sometimes you'll hear from franchise partners say, I'm having a tough time, my market's not great, and we can always use Adam as a reference point when what the weather's like in Ottawa, Canada, and this guy just puts up phenomenal numbers, and he's super engaged in the community. So it's been exciting. I mean, it's from my perspective, listen, every day is not wonderful. You have your challenges, but everybody in our business has that connect point, which is a passion for cycling, and they care. And, cycling is very important to be connected to your community, and that's hard to fake, right? So from our perspective, our franchise partners that do the best are out doing charity work. They're at their local elementary schools, teaching kids how to pump up tires and safety check bikes, and they're engaged in the community. Yeah. And we've got, as I said, franchise partners from Seattle to Florida, and there's just wonderful stories throughout. So
yeah, that's amazing. Now I know you do have 100+ trucks on the road, between franchise partners, between corporate trucks that you've got out there. It's not easy to get to those numbers. There's a lot of things that can go wrong in that point. There's a lot of luck. There's a lot of opportunity that you need to take with both hands. Tell me about some of those pivotal moments in the history of Velofix that have taken you from where you were to where you are now, that really stand out for you as memorable.
Yeah, I think there's a few things along the way. Obviously selling your first franchise. So Simon Whitfield, who is a triathlon legend, a Canadian legend, was officially our first franchise partner in Victoria. When somebody outside your company or your inner circle looks at your business model and decides that it makes sense, that's always great validation. I'll tell you a quick story. I made a comment earlier, if we were from the bike industry, we probably wouldn't have started this business. But when we started and Boris was building the truck, one of my jobs was to get connected to a supplier and start securing our supply chain. Well, I quickly realized and was told that you guys don't have a brick and mortar store, so we're not selling you. So it became very apparent that this is going to be harder than we thought it would, because we literally didn't have a brick and mortar store. Yeah. So getting that first account open, we didn't have full catalog, but getting the first account open was a huge validation point for our model. There was somebody within that company that believed in us and helped us get open so we could buy product. We had some media along the way, which was really cool, that we probably didn't expect. But front page of the Vancouver Sun, Outside Magazine did a cool piece on us. We're in the New York Times business section. We've won a few awards over the years that those are great validation points. Our first franchise partner in the U.S. in Santa Monica was a pretty cool experience to go through. I'd say signing a partner like Canyon Bikes. We are a delivery and build partner for them in the United States, and that was massive validation. Ton of respect for Roman Arnold, who's the founder of Canyon, and what they've built as a company, and for them to trust us delivering and building their bikes for their customer. That was a massive validation for us, and it's a proud partnership for us. So yeah, a lot of little things along the way. When you hit 50 mobile shops on the road, and when you hit 100, and every day, when you're talking and you see the customer reviews, those all add up, and it goes fast. I 7.5 years later, as you can tell, this is probably not all age related. My kids have something to do with it, but yeah, there's a lot of ups and downs and challenges, but we feel very lucky. We feel very lucky, and you made a comment earlier about COVID and that whole process and situation. We maybe get into that in more detail, but that was some.
Tell me about that. Tell me about how the world, all of a sudden, there's so much uncertainty. There's places that are in stay-at-home orders. There's lockdowns. There's essential businesses, and you're thinking about every single state in the US has their own regulations or their own idea of what essential businesses mean. Tell me what those initial couple of weeks were where you're navigating just what it meant for your business in these times.
Yeah, we, I guess this was mid-March, really, when the announcement started to come out. And I think the Bay Area in California is one of the first places to, shelter in place. Obviously, we're watching what's going on in Europe as well, and Spain and France and Italy had really locked down and people couldn't leave their home. And I don't think you could actually legally ride your bike there for a couple months outside. So we were watching all those things. New York went on lockdown. So in a 2-week period, we had been launching corporate trucks at the same time. So we've got all these trucks we're rolling. We've got employees. We've got inventory in those trucks. So, I'd say there's a couple of weeks in March that were pretty dark for us because we didn't know. We thought maybe we'd have to shut the whole system down. And when you look at companies in terms of cash flow and how they're positioned, you've got some of the biggest companies in the world that have gone bankrupt and have had some really challenging times. So it went from that, which I'd say is very, very dark, the darkest I think we've had in the history of the company. And very quickly, those places started opening up. We were deemed an essential service in most markets. And very quickly, you started seeing people buying bikes. They couldn't go golfing anymore. They couldn't play tennis. They had kids at home. They wanted to get out and exercise. And as you and I chatted about real quickly, you think, men and women on 20-year-old bikes with 20-year-old kit rolling around. So people are getting bikes out of the garage. And yep. We went from, I'd say, the 2 darkest weeks in the history of the company to April was the single biggest revenue month we had in the history of the company, and May is going to smash that. So feel very, very lucky. We're open for business, and I think these trends were happening anyway in cycling, but I think post-COVID, cycling is going to become more important in the world, and that's obviously a big benefit for Velofix and our model.
Yeah. There's been a lot of reports and anecdotal reports, industry reports talking about how there has been a boom in bike sales. Particularly some of the lower end product that people are just wanting to get out, and they may haven't had a bike for a few years. There's e-bike sales that are going up. You talked about your relationship with Canyon. Tell me about what you're seeing. What are some of the trends that you're anticipating and planning for post-COVID and whatever this new normal becomes?
For sure. As I said, I think these trends were happening before, Trev, but I think this escalated it very, very quickly. From our perspective, there's 3 things that really we built our business model on that have evolved over the years, but I think post-COVID are going to be even more impactful. And one is direct to consumer. So, I mentioned Canyon. We work with a company called Rad Power, which is an e-bike company out of Seattle. These are companies that are 100% direct consumer. We probably get between 20 and 30 requests a month from brands that want us to do their last mile and their white glove delivery and build. So I think that trend, that direct to consumer trend, is going to continue. You're seeing it in every different industry. Obviously, people have been at home for a month now. They're looking for solutions. Number 2 would be at-home services. Something we've done from day one, but I think that concierge at-home service is going to be more important than it's ever been. People are going to be less likely to get out and go back to the mall or go back to a retail environment. And then the third one is fitness from home. And I call cycling fitness from home, cycling, running. And, I think more and more people they're getting back to basics. They're going to want to get on their bike and go for a ride. So I'd say those are the overall macro trends. And then from a micro perspective, e-bikes, in the years we've launched this business, in the last 5 years, e-bikes have just become such an important part of the cycling world. And that's going to continue. People using e-bikes for commercial use, so delivery drivers and things like that in major city, that's just going to continue. Gravel, getting off the road, more adventure type of riding, which, I know you've been doing for the last couple of years now, and I've started doing a lot more of that. So I'd say those are more the micro trends, but overall, I think more people on bikes, whatever price point and whatever they're doing, I think it's great for the industry overall. And quite frankly, it's great for the planet. So.
Yeah, it is. And you mentioned your gravel and your adventures now that you're into. I want to talk about, go back a couple of years. You kind of committed to getting back into triathlon. I know you kind of did some triathlons a few years ago now, and you got back into it and you set some goals, and I watched you diligent in your training and you're putting in the time and the energy and the effort. I I want to talk about how you think that may have translated to you as a businessman and how that has translated you into a better husband and a better leader and all of those things. Talk to me about how that kind of translated for you.
Well, I'm glad you said better husband. That's great. My wife must have sent you a message commenting on how great I've been in the last couple of years. I did my first Ironman in 2009, kind of on a whim. And then, we started Velofix kind of the end of 2012, and I did Ironman in 2012. And then really got into the cycling world. And I didn't really understand cycling in terms of the community aspect and the social aspect and the adage, cycling is the new golf. As you know, you know this better than I do because you're in this space, but the people that are riding bikes, the demographics, the CEOs, the entrepreneurs, cycling really became a great connector for people. And I know I've done tons of meetings on my bike, and I've met some absolutely amazing people over the years. People I'm sure I would have never met without Velofix and without cycling. So there's been that trend. But from a training perspective, very lucky to have some good buddies that are incredible athletes. Jeff Diker, who was the guy that got me motivated. He went to Kona, and then he had qualified for the Ironman World Championship, the 70.3 race last year. And when we found out it was in Nice, France, it got everybody excited. So Jeff, Corey, and Jeff O'Connell, good guys, from Vancouver. Yep. The four of us kind of made a commitment that we'd all get to Nice. And I love getting back into it. Running is my favorite thing in the world. Cycling would be 2, and swimming would be 1,040th in terms of things I enjoy doing. So I'm not a very good swimmer, but having those guys as people to kind of put yourself up against and show up to training and work out every day is awesome. And people that say they don't have the time and they're too busy, and you can make the time. And that's what I love about triathlon is, one, as I said, for me, swimming is I'm just not very good at, so I love the challenge of it. And then the discipline required. And when you put something on whether it's business or sports, when you put something on the calendar, whether it's a big presentation and you commit to it, it just raises the level. Yeah. And from my perspective, I loved it. 2019 was if you want to call it a selfish year, was a very selfish year. Went out and did a bunch of races, spent a lot of time with my buddies training. My wife was very patient and great. And the kids were, understanding. And that's what I love about it. There's a discipline to it. Always try to stay fit, but there's another level that you need to find when you want to go compete. And for me, as trying to qualify for these races now has become much, much harder over the years. The requirement it takes to get there is a lot different. So yeah. I loved it. I was very, very spoiled and lucky last year. Now, when you look at what's happened in the world, it couldn't have been any better. And the four of us ended up qualifying and going to Nice and having an amazing time together. And I think there's a lot of similarities there. There's a lot of things that come into play on both sides of it. And I think it's wonderful. There's a wonderful collaboration that happens between the two. And it's momentum, Trav, as you know. Like when you get fit and you start seeing those wins, and that affects what you eat, and maybe you don't have that second glass of wine, and you understand how important sleep is, but your brain and your energy level gets picked up. I truly believe that. So the more fit you become and the more you train and work out, for me anyway, the brain gets sharper and I'm more motivated from a work perspective. And I'm very, very lucky. Like that training for triathlon and doing these races is business for me. Yeah. So when I went to St. George, Utah, or Oceanside, you're always working. You're connecting with customers. We've got franchise partners in those areas. And the triathlete, I've said it since day one, is our best customer. They typically have less time and not as great knowledge about their bikes. And, they're training for races, they're traveling to races. So, love the triathlete.
You said a couple of really interesting things there. I think that, the brain sharpness, the focus, the determination, every business leader that I look up to and admire or respect or have had the opportunity to talk to has some element of goals or discipline outside of business life because of what you talked about. It just gives you that moment or that opportunity to separate but you're also more focused when you are within each of those segments. But I've also found, I'm sure you're the same, some of my best ideas come when I'm out in the woods on my bike, or I'm out running, or I'm sweating, or I'm, so I think there's probably benefit to that as well, where you can kind of get away and get some of those new, fresh ideas into your head. Now, I know that your experience last year in Nice wasn't just racing. Jeff Dyker, who you mentioned, shared some interesting intel around some of the off-course activities that you guys enjoyed.
He signed an NDA. I'm a little surprised he's talking about these things, but
I think he skipped the part about you leading the charge. But tell me about, obviously that's a fun trip. You guys are all together. There's this community element. There's this bonding that happens. Tell me about that experience and kind of what that was, not just the off-course stuff, but what it was like to be competing in a world championship.
Yeah, I think first and foremost for us, it was there's putting the goal up, right? As you know, it's setting the goal and then starting to build that foundation to get there. And the training is, to me, some of the most enjoyable parts of it. Like, you love to race, but when you're out there racing, it's really, you're just kind of expressing what you've built to get there. And from our perspective, or my perspective personally, having those three other guys, when you don't want to maybe go swim in the morning, or you don't want to go on that longer bike ride, you get held accountable to that. And listen, I'm 48 years old. I wasn't going there to win. Maybe a couple of the other guys I train and race with could have something realistic like that. I was going there to, lay it all out on race day and do the best I possibly could. But there was no illusion that I was going to be standing on a podium. So I think there's a healthy balance there. And that's what I love about these guys, these guys specifically is, look, we all put in the time and work and we take it very seriously. But, part of this whole trip was when we found out, hey, it's in Nice, France. Like if it was in Cleveland, Ohio, one, I probably wouldn't have done it. And two, and nothing against Cleveland, but two, it just wouldn't have the same ambiance. So, for all of us to get on the plane together and go over there and, I don't want to tell too many stories, but, we got off the plane and went straight to the beach club and had a great lunch and some rosé and I don't know if we slept for the first 24 hours, which is probably not optimal for a pre-world championship race, but, we got up every morning and trained. And then we had some wine and we ate very well and we had some wine at dinner. And that's what I love about it. There's a commitment level and everybody's there to do their utmost, but you got to have fun along the way. And that's, and I think that's the same in business as well. Like if you start taking yourself too seriously, or if you start thinking that, maybe you're something that you're not, you just have to be very realistic. There's some things that I've remembered over the years from bosses and people that I've worked with. And, one of the ones I love is, look, you're never as smart as people think you are, and you're never as stupid as people think you are. Like, you have to be balanced. And I think that's the same in sports. Yeah. As you know, you're going to have very tough training days. And then you're going to have some days on race day that, for whatever reason, you just don't perform at the level that you want. And then sometimes you have, in Oceanside for me, I ended up winning my age group, which is honestly was a bit of a shocker. But it was a great day. Yeah. Everything went well. I felt fantastic. I didn't really put any pressure on myself. I just wanted to go out there and have fun. And, as I said, I think that's part of it, is trying to find that balance point. Because like sports business, if you're constantly getting too high and too low, the stress levels and the exhaustion that brings is pretty tough to deal with. So, yeah, it was a wonderful trip. Super spoiled. My wife came over and some family friends. They were on the promenade in Nice, yelling and cheering us all on. And then my wife and I stayed in the south of France for a little trip after. So, as I said, felt very lucky at the time. And now being on lockdown for the last little while, and obviously, races getting canceled. It's 2019 was a very, very special year for sure.
Yeah, it's amazing. You talked about that passion and keeping it fun and keeping it light in some moments. How do you do that within the business? You're running a big organization, the revenues are growing, the customer base is growing, the franchisees are always looking for your support. How do you keep it light and how do you maintain that passion within business?
Yeah, I think one, I've got two wonderful business partners. So going at it alone, that's a tough proposition. And, you know, I don't know, quite frankly, how a lot of people do it without having, as I said, two wonderful business partners in David and Boris that we can share those things with. Because listen, you have off days, off weeks. When one person's down, one person's up, you can balance those things off of each other. We have a phenomenal team, both in Vancouver and Austin. And, you know, one person or two people or even three founders doesn't make the company. You need a great team. And I think, you know, you try to lead by example. And once again, if the leadership of the company has that same concept of, look, we're all committed here. We expect a lot out of everybody. But, you know, as long as you're going in and putting everything forward in terms of your best effort, we live with those consequences. And you're not going to win all the time. You know, you want to win more than you lose at the end of the day, but you can't live and die by every contract or every interaction. So, you know, from my perspective anyway, is that's what you do, is you just show up every day and you grind away. And as you know, the actual running of a business isn't very romantic. It's a lot of grinding away, and it's a lot of behind the scenes. But, you know, from my perspective, is you get the best people you can involved, and you give them as much ability and motivation as you possibly can, and you know, you try to empower them. And I think if you get the right people and they feel empowered and they're motivated, you know, they're going to be a lot smarter than I am personally, and they're going to drive a lot more things than I ever could. So I think that's a big part of it. But it's not easy, as you know. There's challenging times for sure.
That's great insight. I know that you have actually put into place some really interesting initiatives that have helped bring your whole business together and your whole company together. You're hosting these summits of all the franchisees, and you're bringing in partners, and you're hosting parties and dinners and rides, and you're creating this environment where people are looking forward to those type of events. Tell me about how that kind of changed your business, or the positive impact that's had on your business, putting those types of experiences together.
Yeah, I think, as I said to you, I feel very lucky, because for me, combining a passion with business is a lot of people don't get to do that. And I get to do a lot of cool things. And, you know, I know at times people send me, oh yeah, you know, tough life. But as you know, you're always working, you're always on. So, you know, for me to go to Kona, Hawaii and watch the Ironman World Championship is incredible. I have so much respect for those athletes, not just the pros, but the amateurs that are there. So I feel very lucky. But, you know, I've been to Kona 3 times. I haven't been in the ocean yet. You know, like you're there, you get up in the morning, you do a group ride with, you know, some industry people, and you're networking and you're doing lunch, and there's events every day, as you know, there. So you're always meeting with suppliers. I'm meeting with potential franchise partners, current franchise partners. So, I feel very lucky. Like it's pleasure. I'm riding my bike, but you're working. And the beauty is, as I said to you earlier, is all of our franchise partners have a passion for cycling, whether they're mountain bike riders, or they're just commuting to work, or they're gravel, or they're triathletes, or whatever. So there is a connection point that happens. But I'm sure, as you've witnessed, and I know we've done some events together in New York and other places. When you get people on a bike, everybody's the same. And I don't care if you're the CEO of a billion-dollar company, or if you're the local mechanic in the bike shop or the mobile bike shop. Everybody's the same, and we're all out there suffering. And there's just a connection that happens, as you know, that is very, very special. And I didn't know it had existed before we started this. And the people that I've got to meet and get on bikes with has been absolutely incredible. So for us, that's very, very important, is getting people out of their normal working environment. And as I said, I'm very lucky. Every city I go to is, hey, let's meet in the morning for a ride. Because I'm pretty useless as a mechanic, I'll book when I go to Charlotte, the local franchise partner will have the mechanic come and build my bike out of the travel box, and we'll meet for a morning ride and a coffee. And you just kind of you make that part, as you talked about, you make that part of the business day and part of the meetings. And I think it just changes the atmosphere with people, and you have conversations on a bike that there's no chance you're having those sitting around an office. It just doesn't happen. So we do our franchise partner summit, and we've got great partners and suppliers that come. So we just did it in Scottsdale in January. I think it was 150 or 160 people, and we've got Shimano there, and SRAM, and Oakley, and Canyon, and they're super excited as well because they're getting direct contact with mechanics and franchise owners. So it's a big part of what we do, and it will continue to be for sure.
Yeah, I love it. I've looked up to you as a businessman. You've been very generous with your time and advice and knowledge over the years. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you joining me today and sharing a bit more of the story and talking about some of the trends you're seeing and talking about your experiences in Nice with the boys. So I appreciate you sharing all of that. Before I do let you go, I do have 3 questions that I ask every day, and I'm going to throw them your way. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. So number 1, what's one thing that's changed for you during this COVID lockdown isolation period that you want to keep once we go back to whatever this new normal is?
That is a great question. I would say more time on my own, more time quiet, and food. Good news is I'm riding more. Bad news is I'm eating more. But I feel like I'm a lot more healthy than I used to be.
Yeah. What have been some of those things where you have had more time alone? What are some of those activities or things that you're taking on that are giving you that space?
Yeah, I think from my perspective is part of my role is there's a creative factor that needs to come in play, and I find personally that's hard to get there in a busy office and interruptions and a lot of noise. So as I said, I guess lucky in a way. I've got 18-year-old twins, a boy and a girl. So I don't have the same challenges as some people at home in terms of trying to babysit and homeschool and things like that. My wife's very busy with the project as well. So just much more time on the bike. Get up before work, usually 5:30, 6 in the morning. I'm an early riser. You can get a nice bike ride in. And then after work, might do 2 days or whatever. But those are the times I think you mentioned, like the brain works differently. The endorphins are going. And, that's what I love about being off road is you can kind of zone out a little bit more and get a lot of wonderful ideas. But even sitting in an office by yourself, you can kind of shut the laptop and I spend a lot more time writing and journaling and things like that. And those are connect points that, when you're busy and you get in that rhythm of it. But from my perspective, not that I had a big commute in Vancouver, but it takes time to get to the office. And then a big thing for me, Travis, I was traveling a lot.
Yeah.
I was on the road a lot. And as you know, it's tiring. You don't eat well, and it takes a lot out of you. So, really since February, I've been home, and my energy levels have been much better. And as I said, I'm eating more, but I think for the most part, I'm eating a lot better.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. I love that. I love the time and energy and focus you're putting onto that. So I'm hoping you'll keep that as well. What's one thing you thought, second question, what's one thing you thought was important before this period that you're happy to leave in the past?
Yeah, I think face-to-face interaction is very important. Don't get me wrong. I think being around people and getting a ride in and things like that, there's a massive benefit to that. But I think also from a business perspective there's a tendency to fill up days with meetings.
Yeah.
And, I've learned, and I've been trying to simplify things as much as I possibly can, but we've got, as I said, a great team. Everybody's been remote for, I guess a month and a half now. And I think we've been just as efficient. People have stepped up and actually worked harder. So, the office environment, I don't think is as important as maybe as I thought it was. And then to be able to do some Zoom meetings and then even maybe just let people make decisions on their own. And not have a meeting about it, I think makes the business more efficient. So I think this has proven to a lot of people, not just me, that you can run a business efficiently from really anywhere.
Yeah. It's interesting how we've been forced into it, but it's, there's a lot of successful businesses who have been this way for a while now, but it has taken something like this for the rest of us to kind of catch up and be okay with it.
Yeah.
Third question, what's been the most memorable moment of joy you've had during this period?
That's a really good question. I think, I've been locked down with my wife for the whole time. And as I said to you before, I used to travel a lot. So as you know, when you're around somebody all the time, there's a little bit more friction point and things like that. But I say this to people all the time, is Monday to Friday, it feels the same. Honestly, I'm in meetings, emails, Zoom calls, the days go very quickly. My rhythm hasn't changed a lot.
Yeah.
But, after work and the restaurants being closed, the movie theaters being closed, everything being closed. So, you know, I think just the more time together and just same thing, kind of quiet time, like just going for walks and talking about things. And I think it's very easy to get caught up in being busy, and people like to tell you how busy they are. And this is forced to slow down. And, you know, don't get me wrong, I'm sure I've gotten on her nerves many, many times. And, and it hasn't all been wonderful, but yeah, just way more time together. We've been walking, and now that the weather's better here in the Okanagan, getting out on rides together, and you know, not for fitness, just riding around and talking and touring around, and feel very lucky to be able to do that.
Yeah, very cool, mate. This has been great. I've enjoyed our conversation as I always do. It's always insightful. I love hearing the story. I love kind of bringing the story to life for some of the people who may not have heard it before. And I appreciate your time as always. And it's been amazing to have you on the show. So thanks for joining me.
Thanks, man. And congratulations on the show. Very impressive run here. How many more days do you got?
We got 9 more days.
9 more days.
I'm actually a bit sad. I'm like, I've filled up the roster for the rest of the month for guests, and there's hundreds of people that I wish I would have been able to get on the show that I haven't. So I'm going to have to look at the next iteration of this. It won't be every day, that's for sure. My wife probably would kill me if I did that, but it'll be some kind of iteration. But I've been enjoying it, and looking back on the roster of people has been really fulfilling. So
awesome. Good for you. I've enjoyed watching and listening as well. So good seeing you, brother.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
Take care.